goes. Just the way it goes. Degrees.
Hello, everybody. We are finally here. The Hookup in Music has finally arrived at the Sadistic Penguin Studios. Yes.
Wendy, I'm home. I'm not gonna hurt you. I'm just gonna bash you.
All right. That's enough over there from The Shining. All right. We are the Hookup on Music, and we are here for you for your musical pleasure. We are going to talk about every different type of music, any different type of music, all different types of music. And we are sharing this amazing experience with our amazing brothers here at the Sadistic Penguin Studios. You know, you have an amazing Yumper and Svo go to the show. You have a very, very amazing, it's getting drafty in here. Very, 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 very good stuff. Lots of stuff coming. Really, 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 really glad to be a part of this. This is something that well, I'm very, very excited about. You know, we're excited here at the old Hookup on Music. You know, it's always exciting for new journeys. You know, and tonight, you know, we have a really, 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 really good journey for you. You know, we're gonna go, and today we're just going through here, checking some different stuff out, making sure everything is looking good before I bring in my guest, who is really, really, really going to really have I think a good time here. We're going to be talking about really, really some good things, and so please thank you for welcoming us here, and please keep tuning in. Because we are so glad to be part of Sadistic Penguin Studios. So we hope you have a good time. And with that being said, let's get this rock and roll show on the road for this week. I am a little star-studded here today, and that's kind of why I messed up, because I am with the ever-amazing author Tony Kiene, who has wrote this awesome book, who we're going to talk about a little bit while later. But thank you for joining me, my man.
Thank you, Tony. It's a pleasure to be here.
No problem. So let's jump right into it. When did you get started writing this awesome book, If You See Me?
Oh, that's a long story. I don't know if I could maybe talk about how I met Pepe later, but
right there, yeah.
You're gonna say, okay, well, I met Pepe the same way. I discovered Pepe, I should say, the same way I kind of discovered Prince when I was 7. And for, you know, people will know that Prince is a seminal figure in this book. When I was 7, I had one record that I owned. It was the Jackson 5 Dancing Machine single. It was a 45. And I played it all the time. I had one of these little, just simple record players. And I had a friend, and Prince's first album, his debut album, For You, would have been out now a couple months. This is 1978. And nobody outside of Minneapolis or the big cities knew. I mean, he wasn't a star yet by any means. People really didn't know who he was. But I saw my friend, his grandmother or his aunt or somebody had given him an 8-track tape of this album, and Prince is on the cover, and the cover he's got this perfectly shaped afro. Again, it's 1978. and there's like the sun. It's hard to explain, but there's the sunlight that it's kind of like
Well, I know exactly what you're talking about.
right.
Oh
It's
yeah.
beaming. It's like coming through
Oh
his
yeah.
eyes. It's just the image just struck. That's really cool picture. So that guy looks cool. So I just took a chance and I traded my 45 of Dancing Machine for this 8-track that my friend he had never listened to. He didn't, again, nobody knew, we didn't know who Prince was. But I took it home and just we had an 8-track. My family, we were already always a generation or two behind technologically.
Oh yeah.
So we had an 8-track player when people were starting to get cassette players and whatnot. But I popped it in. It's 33 minutes long, and I became a Prince. What we call, fellow Prince freaks. We would call ourselves Prince freaks.
Say it. Say it
Yeah,
out.
and
We got a lot of Prince fans here who tune
yeah,
into this. So
yeah, at age 7, right? Who would have thought? And there was just something about the music. I'd never heard anything like it. It was, and it's not his most celebrated album, but there was so much on there to me, And so I became a fan. And then his next few albums, they were a little more risque in the
oh yeah.
material.
Controversy, Dirty
Yeah,
Mind. Oh
yeah,
yeah.
and the imagery. And my parents will never let me buy those. But I had a friend up the street who was a little bit older, um, and he had all those albums. So I would, by this time, had an allowance that I would buy my own, vinyl records, and I would just borrow the disc and slide it in like one of my other album sleeves, right? Yeah, sneak it in. That's how I would,
Awesome.
listen to him. And so obviously his career slowly was building, and with Purple Rain, it blew up. And so they were kind of, they weren't puff pieces, but these little biographies came out about Prince. People, Purple Rain was out, so people would like turn around, the trade paperback books. They're
Yeah.
not really serious biographies, but
Oh yeah.
people are just trying to make money off of this phenomenon. So I was reading these books, and they talk about this guy Pepe Willie, right, and how he was a mentor to Prince. So that's how I learned about Pepe. And then what really grabbed me though was a couple years later, Pepe put out an album that he had done in the '70s. He was the first person ever to take Prince into a professional studio and pay him got him signed up to the music union when he was a teenager. And again, I'll talk about more later about how Pepe and Prince came to be. But so Pepe put out this album in 1986, and his name wasn't on it, right? It was called Minneapolis Genius, and the band was 94 East, which was Pepe's band. But again, it had Prince and some other, some of Prince's contemporaries that he grew up with played on this record. Right. And again, I remember seeing the record. It's purple and it's got clouds and it's got a dove with a rose in its mouth. And it's, again, it said Minneapolis Genius. I didn't know what it was, but I was like, I know I'm going to buy it.
Oh yeah.
And I'm going to find out what it is. I bought it, and again, it was a vinyl record. They still had those then. And I took it home, and then I saw, okay, I know this name, Pepe Willie. So that's kind of how I became a fan of Pepe. And as the years went by, I'd see Pepe interviewed in Prince fan magazines and other things. And then there was a documentary about Prince that came out in the early '90s. And that was actually the first time I ever saw Pepe talk, right? And I remember my friends and I sitting around seeing him. And friends, that guy looks so cool. You could just walk up and start talking to him and, hang out with him, right? And it's like, yeah. So anyway, I moved here in 1997. And I'd been here about 10 days. And Prince was doing a benefit at Paisley Park one night. And I'm just standing in line waiting to get in. And this car comes up and, tries to they weren't letting anybody parking in the parking lot that night. You had to park on the street. But this car tried to go in the parking lot, and they stopped him. And this guy got out. And I saw, that's Pepe, right? So he walked up and talked to whoever was security, and they said, "You got to park on the street, Pepe, or whatever." And I don't think most of the crowd was younger that night for whatever reason. I don't know how many of them knew who Pepe was, but I'd known who he was now for, at that point, half my life, 13 years. and I'm pretty much of an introvert. I don't like to talk. I'm
Yeah,
not I'm not one to like introduce myself to people.
it's hard. Sometimes in those situations too, it's definitely tough.
Yeah, but I just blurted out, "Hey, Pepe," right? 99 times out of 100, I wouldn't have said anything, but it just came out of my mouth, and he came up to me and he said, "Hey, where did I know you from?" Or "How do I know you?" Something to that effect. I said, "You don't, but I
You
know
know?
you." So we started talking, and we spent like a lot of that night together just talking, and we became friends. And I already knew his story, so he didn't
Yeah.
have to, so he's, and I happened to have started publishing some stuff already,
Yeah.
just small articles and things here and there about Prince or other things. And so we talked about writing a book, and this is 1997. And I always thought to my, I don't know how to write a book. I can't write a book.
Oh yeah. Well, yeah. When you're in the early
Yeah,
phases. Yeah.
yeah. And the longest thing I had written my master's thesis on Prince is like 80 pages. I'm like,
Yeah. Oh yeah.
I didn't think I could write any more than that. So we had talked about it, and we just never got around to it. And then finally, around maybe 2006, 2007, he said, "Let's get, we've been talking about this for 10 years. Let's do something." And we put maybe 100 pages together, and it wasn't crafted like it was just capturing different stories from his life, right? And just kind
Yeah.
of piecing them together. It wasn't really,
Well, that's what makes a good book.
yeah, well,
It's
yeah.
really
And
good. Yeah.
it wasn't yet what you'd call book form, but it was
No,
just
but you're
a
just
bunch of
like
stories.
gathering the stories that could,
Exactly.
form it.
Yeah. And then, but I always had a full-time job,
It's tough. Yeah, that's the hard part.
right. And we kind of let it fall by the wayside. And then 10 years later, we start talking about it again. And I think it was February maybe of 2016. We just sat down and we said, okay, we're just going to do it. I said, you know what? I'm just going to throw caution to the wind and we'll see what happens. So we started writing it. The way we would do it is I'd go over to his house every week and we just swap stories or just talk about things. Some things we talked about 100, already talked about 100 times, but we just kept, and I just started to build chapters.
I mean,
And uh, maybe had 5 or 6 chapters done. Then Prince dies in April of that year, and we're like, we couldn't. It was too
honestly,
hard.
I'm at work today and I'm reading this. Okay, I'm
Right,
supposed to be working, and I get to the part where Pepe's talking about how
right.
it affected him, and I
Mhm.
affected me. I mean, I remember it affected a lot,
Yeah,
everyone. Yeah,
yeah, yeah. But so we put it aside, but we told ourselves, okay, we got to finish it now. We don't have a choice.
yeah,
And again, it probably took another year to complete. And the manuscript we turned in was almost 500 pages.
yeah.
A lot of it was trimmed, and I'll talk about that later. There's, Pepe and I talk about that all the time. All the stories that are in there, and all the ones that aren't.
Oh yeah. Well, that's the
And
thing,
right,
In a later date, if you're not busy, we could have a part two.
well,
This
we've
is
talked
this
about
is
that,
good.
and
Yeah,
yeah. I mean, we've always, or maybe someday we'll, re-release
yeah.
the book in its full form.
I mean, honestly, I know a lot of the backing people, and and it, like even Bobby Z, who you get
Right,
a quote from here on the back. I
right.
mean, honestly, it was like last year. My daughter, she's one.
Mhm,
I kept playing the controversy video because
mhm.
she keeps dancing to it. And man, I always focus in on Bobby Z on the
Right,
drum for some reason. He was really
right.
good, but
Yeah,
it's cool. Very
yeah.
cool. But so then you go ahead and you kind of finish up the book, then you get to
Mhm,
that point.
mhm.
And honestly, it's a really sharp read. I even like the forward, in the beginning
Right.
with Clarence Collins. I thought that was
Mhm,
really,
mhm.
really solid, just kind of because he's talking about being, kind of a little bit of a mentor to Pepe. It's
Right.
it's kind of like showing the steps.
Yeah,
I found that to be very cool.
yeah. And that's it is cool. And Clarence, he's in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. And he taught Pepe, and Pepe took those lessons and taught Prince.
Yeah.
and that's a big theme in the book, is how to pay it forward, to pass what you learn on, to take what you learn and share it with those around you. And I know that was important to Pepe to really to center on that theme, and really, because again, and it wasn't just his uncle. I mean, Pepe was surrounded by who's who of rock and roll and soul music. His sister dated Stevie Wonder. His aunt went to Juilliard with Miles Davis and was friends with Thelonious Monk, right? So Pepe grew up in this world, and he learned so much from so many different people. And I don't want to derail, your the direction you want to go in, but and we can talk about it.
No, I want to talk about whatever. This is you.
Okay.
This show is always what this show is about, is just you getting it out and us sharing it with other people. Because these are just, no matter what, you could be talking about Pepe eating a taco and it's going to be exciting to somebody, because you know what? He's somebody who's awesome and worth listening to. So whatever you got.
Yeah. And that's the thing. Pepe's story, to me, Pepe had a best, if you talk about Pepe's life from, birth to age 22, that could have been a bestseller.
Yeah.
Right. If it just, again, I'm proud of the book. There's so much, again, that was left out just because it, 500 pages is a lot for an unknown author.
But still, I mean, honestly though, I've been lots, like I said, the cover is smooth, it's not something that, it looks like it's thrown together, and the pictures in the middle, I mean, they tell the story.
Mhm.
Like sometimes I'm going to say I've read hundreds of these, and some of them, they give you not the pictures that you want to see.
Right.
These pictures were like deep cut pictures here.
Mhm. Yeah. In the Minnesota Historical Society Press, they have a great reputation. They're I don't know if this is their official motto, but they say we're a small but mighty press. They put out a lot of really great content, and they were a great, we were really fortunate to get. That's the other thing. When the book was done, we're like, okay, how do we get it published? We had no idea how to go about it. And people would say, well, you're not going to get a book published unless you have a literary editor, or not literary, whatever it's called,
Agent,
literary agent, right? And they said, and you're never going to get a literary agent, because most of the agents aren't taking on new clients. They've got a stack of book on their desk that they're never going to read. So we were made to think it would be impossible, right?
Yeah.
And at first it took a good year of trying to, and I don't know how, we didn't really have a team to, we just did this together. And when they approached us, or when we met them, they said, how far along is the manuscript? Because usually they're signing contracts when the books are being written.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Like, all the manuscripts, 500 pages, it's been done for 12 months or 15 months or whatever. So they're like, oh, that's great. But yeah, I guess we did it the wrong way. We should have got our advance.
Yeah. Well,
again, that's not why we did it.
No, but it's still, I'm not gonna lie, when you put this much of good work into something, you should be rewarded a little bit. And Pepe, and honestly, you're talking to someone, no matter who the artist is, like who's someone else that you like, other than Prince and Pepe, who's another artist that you maybe have enjoyed?
My musical tastes are so broad.
Yeah.
And they weren't always. I shouldn't say that. When I was a kid, the only thing I would buy was a Prince or Prince related.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because I didn't have that much money. I liked other music, but I run the gamut. I don't have a lot of, I probably have everything. I probably have, I don't know, 4,000 or 5,000 CDs.
Oh, that's awesome.
I'm a CD guy, and I'm starting to,
me too,
buy vinyl again. But
they're coming back. Yeah,
the only genre I don't have a lot of content, it would be country music. And it's not that I don't respect it. It's just not, it just doesn't.
Not the strongest
thing,
of your
but
thing. Yeah.
I respect all music. But yeah, I give you a list of 100
Well, you brought up earlier the Jackson 5 today. I got this booklet in the car. It's like 50
Right.
mix CDs with just random songs. I don't remember
Uh,
what's on them, and I
right.
put it on there. Like Blame It on the Boogie by the
Right.
Jacksons was on there. And and then from there it's like something from the 80s. It mixes
Right.
it up. I'm a
Right.
big mixer, mixing it up.
Uh-huh.
But
Yeah.
I also like the reason I like this book and I liked wanting to talk to you is I always like the deeper stories.
Mhm. Mhm.
Pepe is, he's, it's deeper. I mean,
Right.
I love Prince. He's one of my
Right.
favorites, but I
Right.
always think sometimes some of the little bit of the lesser stories, they need to be known just as much. So
Right.
I'm really glad you were able to put this book together.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And it's opened a lot of doors. You and I were talking earlier. I'm working on another um the memoirs of another well-known Minneapolis sound artist, and I've had others that have approached me. So it's opened a million doors for me. And it also, even before Pepe's book came out, um, I was asked to do. I have a couple Prince related columns that
Mhm.
I've written over the last few years. One, it's a local newspaper here in Minneapolis. And then also um, I knew somebody that Prince's there's a thing called the PRN Alumni Foundation, the Prince Rogers Nelson Alumni Foundation. And these are all the people that were employed by Prince over a 40-year, you know, over 40 years, 4 decades. Everything from, not just musicians, but the people that, janitors,
Yeah.
recording engineers, anybody that worked for Prince is considered a member. And the purpose of the foundation is to fulfill Prince's philanthropy, the things that he supported, music education in schools, a bunch of other
A lot
things.
of
But
the stuff you did.
that's why they exist. But they had this idea, let's tell stories about the people that work for Prince. And again, some of them are musicians, but again, a lot of them are recording engineers, or they were, did whatever, people that aren't people that nobody else in the world knows, right? But I got to tell, and we haven't done it for a few years, but over the course of a couple of years, I got to tell their stories, right? And what it was like to work with Prince. And, these stories were things that, you read one of these stories, you're bound to laugh,
Oh, yeah.
you're bound to cry.
Yep.
I mean, in just the richness, and it was so fulfilling just to,
Yeah.
and part of people that one thing Prince did, number one, he put women
To the
in,
front.
not just in the
Yeah.
band, but in president of the, or vice president of the whole operation. Well, he always had women, right? Women in the recording, recording engineers. He had several female recording engineers who have gone on and are considered, famous. People like Susan Rogers or Peggy
Yeah.
McCreary.
Yeah.
Peggy McCreary did Van Halen's first couple albums,
Yeah.
right? So these are, and the other thing he did, one of the themes that always came through is people would walk in the door, they want to work for Prince, right? And they came in to do something, and they left doing something else. One gentleman, he wanted to be a recording engineer. He's from North Dakota. He had no experience. He came here to go to school for it, but in the meantime, he shows up at Paisley Park with a resume.
Yeah.
Says, I want to be a recording engineer. And the guy who was in charge of I think it was Tom Tucker Sr. at the time, who was Prince's principal engineer, um, said, why should I hire you? You have no experience. You have, no education. And I've got a stack of resumes, 100 high of people around the world who have all these things who want to work here. So why should I hire you? And the guy says I don't know if I should share his name or not, but he said, I noticed this building has a lot of windows.
Yeah.
Somebody's got to wash them. So, the Tom Tucker thought that was pretty
Witty.
witty, right?
Yeah.
So said, okay, I'm going to make you the night. You're going to answer the phones at night.
Yeah, yeah. Hey,
The building's always, somebody's always
that's what
Prince
they
is there.
always teach you.
Yeah.
You got to go in there and take whatever
Right.
you want to be a part of it.
And eventually he becomes one of Prince's chief engineers. He
That's
learned
so
how to become
cool.
an engineer because he read all the manuals for all the equipment
You know, how
while
many
he's
people
sitting
have
there.
blown their opportunities by not doing something
Yeah.
smart like that. You know.
And there's so many people who walked through the doors, and Prince gave them a chance to be something more than they ever thought they could be. And to again, that's I'll talk more about how Pepe met Prince. But when I said, "Hey Pepe," right, I think about that moment. And again, most of the time I wouldn't have said anything, but those two words changed my life. Right,
Yeah. Yeah.
they put my life on a completely different trajectory. I came here because I
Oh,
wanted to be around the Minneapolis sound, and I
yeah.
wanted to be part of this world and just experience it as a fan.
Yeah.
But meeting Pepe, it just changed my life. And to think that I had the opportunity to interview some of these people whose names I would read in liner notes, when I was 12 years old, I'm talking
Yeah.
to them and writing a story about their life. And
Well,
it's totally another.
I'm empathetically living it through you right now because, like, honestly, like, just hearing that you got to
Yeah,
meet him,
right,
this is amazing to me, you know what I mean? It's because there's and as you know more than anybody else, so many stories that you couldn't even share because you didn't
right,
have enough time, but there's just so
right.
many, you
Yeah,
know?
that was the thing with this book. Again, it came out during COVID, and we had all these plans, right? We knew the book was coming out in the fall of 2020, back in the summer of 2019,
Yeah.
and nobody knew, COVID
What
wasn't a
was gonna
thing yet.
happen, yeah.
Yeah, and we had all these plans to do, like, book things, events in LA and New York and Chicago in addition to here. Everything turned out to be virtual, of course. Um, but, like, I remember 3 or 4 interviews that Pepe and I did together, some local, some with, there was a show in Brooklyn that, where Pepe's from, and everybody, 3 or 4 of the viewers said, "I wish you would have talked about more about your life in New York growing up." And we were like, "We did." About 200 pages worth, but it didn't make the book. It was a Minnesota publisher, so
Yeah.
that makes, and again, it was too long, so that a lot of the New York stuff got cut, and some Minnesota stuff got cut too. But again, I thought, I was like, "Oh, wow." And I remember Pepe telling his friends, "You're gonna be in the book, right? Pick it up." And they go through, and they're not there. And their part got, the part that talked about them was cut or whatever. So that was unfortunate. But again, I mean, I'm hoping we can find a way to tell those stories, and we've explored, talked about doing a documentary, or there was even interest, even though Pepe's not, again, he's not a household name. He's well known in the Twin Cities,
Yeah.
in the music scene, but he's not known over the world. But we've had people talk about, do we do a musical, right? Which is a big thing now for, when they chronicle, Tina Turner's got a new musical out,
Yeah.
which is huge. Again, I'm not equating Pepe to Tina Turner, but that's a
No, but
way to,
still, yeah,
yeah, that's a way
there
to
is.
tell, that's a way to tell these stories. So, I mean, Pepe, he's still going. I'm thinking Pepe's got to be 75 this year,
Still
this
rocking
September.
though.
Yeah,
Still
yeah, he
rocking,
is.
still rolling,
So he's still, yeah, we're still trying to, you know, get
you
the
know?
word out about his life, which is amazing. The things that he experienced, and like you said, you've been reading it, and
Yeah.
um, just
It's just a lot, you know it's cool to, like I was saying earlier, to hear things from Pepe's, perspective,
mhm,
it's really
mhm,
makes it a really, really good read, and I could imagine that just you all the time that you got to spend with him,
yeah,
all the things that, you got to learn, and I'm sure, did you get to meet, Bobby Z at all by chance?
yeah. I've met Bobby. I've met most. I mean, not
Most
everybody,
but most of
but most of the people that came up with Prince.
Mhm.
I got to meet Prince, himself. a
Awesome.
few months after I met Pepe. And it's fun. When I was in high school, I've told this story before, but my dream was to play in Prince's band.
Yeah. Oh, you play? You play an instrument?
Well, I tried.
Well, we all did. We all did.
Yeah, I always wanted to play guitar, and my daughter, she's 24. She just turned 24 on what is today? Thursday. She turned 24 on Tuesday.
Oh,
She's an incredible musician. She plays guitar, bass, drums, a little bit of
awesome.
keyboards. She got all the talent. It skipped over me. My mother and father had some musical talent.
So to my
Um,
daughter too.
yeah, but yeah, it passed through me to my daughter. But I tried. I just didn't have the aptitude or the patience. I played. I'm probably making an excuse, but when I was a sophomore in high school, I was in the concert choir, which was what they call a 0 hour class. It met before school started.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I get up at 5 in the morning to get ready for school, which for me started at 6:25 or whatever. Then I do a full day of school. Then I was a sophomore. I was on the junior varsity basketball team, but I also was a reserve on the varsity. And there were a couple of us that did that. And we had to practice with the junior varsity and the varsity. So I practiced twice. I have 9 hours of school instead of 8.
Yeah.
And then 4 hours of basketball practice. I could
Oh,
never find the time to.
get to that guitar.
And I just didn't have it was a cheap guitar. It was hard to play. It hurt my
Oh,
fingers.
I actually had
But,
this conversation with somebody at work just this week because he's wanting to sell his guitar, and I was like, "Is it a
right.
Fender Squire?" Because that was my first guitar.
It was called a Harmony, and it was like a,
Oh, I know Harmony. Oh yeah.
yeah, $89 from JCPenney catalog. So I
Oh,
just never I just never had the aptitude or the talent. I just didn't have it. Didn't have the patience to learn. Um, so I never followed. But getting here, I mentioned this earlier. I always saw myself here. And when I was in college, um, in the early '90s, I didn't know what I wanted to do, but popular culture became part of the academy. People were writing about the political and social nature of music and film and art. It was becoming a thing, and I thought that there's my lane.
yeah.
I can write about Prince. I can write about music, and I started doing that in college, and that kind of led me to where I am today. So yeah, I mean but one thing I want to go back. I just want to talk about how Pepe met Prince
Yes, please.
because I think it again speaks to. I mentioned that saying those two words, "Hey Pepe," how they changed my life. So Pepe grew up in Bed-Stuy, Brooklyn. As I mentioned, obviously his uncle Clarence Collins was in Little Anthony and the Imperials, who were a huge group in the '50s and '60s in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame today. And they would play these shows at first was the Brooklyn Paramount Theater. Alan Freed, who people may know, Alan Freed is the
Oh yeah.
person he coined the term rock and roll.
Oh yeah.
He would do these shows, and Alan, and he had some problems later with the payola scandals and whatnot, but he was considered a revolutionary at the time because he was bringing together. He was doing these reviews in Brooklyn and other places where he's bringing the best white artists and the best black artists together, and he's bringing black and white audiences together, which even in New York in the '50s and early '60s, I mean, nobody else was doing that.
No, no, no.
Even though there's not legal segregation, there were still places in the North where you had an integrated crowd. They'd run a rope, across the floor where the black kids would be on one side
Yeah.
and the white kids. So Pepe got to experience that as a young man, seeing his uncle perform and all these other acts. After Alan Freed got in some trouble, Murray the K. Kaufman, who was another, like, these are Dick Clark before Dick Clark is who these guys are.
Oh
You
yeah.
know,
Oh,
yeah,
I spent it's cool is going back and watching some of those old Alan Freed type of
right,
stuff. But yeah,
yeah, yeah,
definitely.
yeah. So that was Pepe's world. Pepe was, by the age of 12 in his neighborhood. If you weren't in a gang, you weren't safe, right? So he had to
Yeah.
join a gang, and so he had one foot in that world, and he always thought, I don't know if I'm going to make it to be 16. I don't know if I'm going to be 18 or but he also had this foot in this other world where Murray the K would do these rock and roll review shows where all the acts from Motown and all these the Righteous Brothers and Wayne Newton, right, and Marvin Gaye and Mary Wells and Martha and the Vandellas and the Supremes, right, and Little Anthony and the Imperials and Ray Charles and Jackie Wilson.
We could
So,
spend an hour on each one of these
right,
artists,
yeah,
just to let you know at a later date.
but so as a teenager, Pepe, like I said, he's got one foot in the gang world.
Yeah.
He's got his other foot where he's going to these shows with his uncle.
Yeah.
And his uncle said, "Why don't you go around the dressing rooms and ask Chubby Checker if he needs, something from the store, right?" And he did that. And Chubby Checker would send him to get a sandwich or whatever, right? And then he'd pay him, here's a couple dollars or whatever. So Pepe, as a 14, 15-year-old kid, always had a couple $100s in his pocket
That's
because he's getting money
awesome.
he's getting money from all these artists, and he's just living this world and seeing how, again, these integrated audiences, how these artists got along together. At the same time, also seeing or learning about how hard it was for Black artists in that era. Like Little Anthony and the Imperials, they were forced when they were just starting their first record deal. They were forced to sign over their royalties at gunpoint
Yeah, I can
because
imagine.
they're it was the mob had a big part of
I've heard about that. Yes.
yeah. So Pepe experienced all this, right? And when he's he's becoming a songwriter and a musician himself. He's being mentored by his uncle and a gentleman. I don't know if you've ever heard of Teddy Randazzo.
No, I have not.
Okay, Teddy was a songwriter. He's in the Songwriters Hall of Fame. He wrote a lot of the Imperials' hits
Okay.
In the '60s. Songs that "Hurt So Bad," for example, covered
Oh yeah,
by
I
Linda
know that song.
Ronstadt. Yeah,
Oh yeah.
that's a Teddy Randazzo song. So Teddy became Pepe's mentor, taught him how to write songs, taught him how to construct a verse, chorus, verse, bridge, outro, whatever. These formulas that were used in that era to have a hit record. And so anyway, Pepe's about 20. It's the Vietnam era. He's eventually going to be drafted into the army, right? But before that, he was trying to make his way as a songwriter, but he was still working for his uncle's group, Little Anthony and the Imperials, and they were playing at the Copacabana. They did like a 2-week stand in '69, and the Copa was the place to. If you played at the Copa,
Oh
you
yeah.
were you were huge. So Pepe is working kind of still like a valet. He's he gets their suits together for their
You have to get
performances.
ready.
Making sure they got something to eat. Uh, handing them towels when they come off stage and whatnot. So anyway, Pepe's in the dressing room after one show, and Sammy Strain comes in. He's a member of the group, and Sammy went on to sing with the OJs later. So Sammy's in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame twice
Further.
with the Imperials and with the
And the
OJs.
OJs.
So Sammy's this cool dude that Pepe really looks up to, and he's always got these women around. So and Pepe at the time didn't have a girlfriend. So Sammy comes in and says, "Who's the girl out in the waiting room with the green eyes?" Right? And Pepe, just like I said something that was out of character when
Yeah.
Pepe just said, he blurted out for whatever reason. He's like, "She's with me," right? Pepe had no idea who this girl. He never, he didn't know what he was talking about. It's like in his mind, he knew Sammy had good taste, right? And he thought, okay, and if I say she's with me, I know he's not gonna mess with her. So then he's telling himself, okay, now I got to find out who this girl is.
Yeah.
So he goes out in the waiting room looking for the girl with the green eyes, and he finds her, and he's, "Hi, my name is Pepe. Who are you?" He's like, "I'm Chantel," right? And Pepe says, "Who are you here to see?" And she's like, "I'm, here. My aunt is dating Clarence, right? And Pepe's like, Clarence is my uncle, right? I know, his aunt's name, I think it was Kalua. It's like, I know her, right? And Pepe, his big line, right, with women at the time was he's like, "Do you have a curfew?" That was
I love that.
right. And she says, "No, I don't have a curfew." And anyway, make a long story short, they start to date, and they become real close. And she's from Minneapolis, and she also tells Pepe, "I have a cousin. He's 12 years old. He's really becoming a good musician, right? And his name is Prince, right?" And anyway, Pepe and Chantel eventually get married. Pepe is drafted, like I say, he's drafted in the army. He gets out of the army, goes to Minneapolis to see her. They weren't married yet, right? But he meets Prince for the first time. He wasn't out of the army, but he was on leave, I think. And he meets Prince, who's 12 years old, but he looks like he's 8, right?
Oh yeah.
Because he's so short. He's so, and they discovered some video of Prince here locally about a year ago when he was 12 years old. His mother worked for the school system, and the school system went on strike in 1970.
Okay.
And the reason they were looking for this footage was because the Minneapolis school system went on strike last year, and it had been almost 50 years since they'd done it, right? So they're just looking for video of the last time the school system went on strike, and somebody's at one of the local TV stations is looking at this film, and they're interviewing kids, right, 12-year-old kids, and one of them happens to be Prince, talking to the local CBS affiliate about the strike and how do the kids see it, and everybody's looking at it in the newsroom, and nobody knows it's Prince, but then somebody says, "That's Prince. I think that's Prince." And they research it, and that turns. So anyway, I only bring that up because when you look at it again, he looks like he's 8.
Yeah. Oh yeah. I mean,
he's so short, right? So Pepe thought about it, or Pepe, when he met him, he didn't pay him any attention. Again, he looks like he's 8, and again, Chantel said he can play music, but he didn't really, wasn't around. Pepe wasn't around, that Christmas time enough to or whatever time it was of the year to learn anymore. But when Prince is 14 or 15, he starts, and Pepe and Chantel are married. He starts calling Pepe and asking him questions about publishing and things that most 14 or 15-year-olds don't think about.
Don't think about.
Yeah. So Prince was already thinking about those things, and again, eventually Pepe, moves here, becomes his mentor, but I bring that up because if Pepe doesn't say she's with me, he never meets her, and you and I aren't talking.
Timing, and
Right.
fate is everything.
Yeah, and that's why I bring that up, is because it's just she's with me. Yeah.
I mean, even honestly, this is the same exact story of how I met Adam.
Right.
It's something simple. I'm on something on Twitter talking about White Sox. I start talking about movies. We talk about movies. Now I'm doing music. Now here we are.
Right.
And honestly, I spend all my time loving stuff like that. And honestly, the rest of this night, I'm going to spend thinking about that awesome story, because that's a really, 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 really good story. And honestly, I'm even going to maybe think about calling this episode "What's Your Curfew?" because that story right there, that is the one I will be. That's awesome. Really cool. Really cool.
Yeah.
I just want to say thank you so much for joining me tonight.
Well, thank you, Tony. I really appreciate it.
This book is really, really awesome. If You See Me, by Tony Kiene, and it's
Pepe Willie. Pepe Willie with I got a gift.
Yeah. I mean, I was gonna say Pepe Willie with Tony Kiene, but it's all about Pepe's story, which is really, really awesome. And, and that's the one thing I never want to do, is I didn't want this to be about like, this is Prince, and then Pepe.
Right.
No, this is Pepe, because he really, really, really did a great job. And that stuff that you were talking about, those albums in the 80s, that 94 East and stuff like that, definitely worth going back and checking out.
Yeah. And a lot of those are instrumentals. But the thing about it too, that's how Pepe had a record deal with Paul. That's how he got his record. He took Prince in the studio as a 17-year-old kid. He knew he was that good. He said, "I want you to play on my demo." And Prince at 17 is just playing it, and Pepe, the rest of the band would talk about it, afterwards, right? Did you hear what, God? And then Prince would call Pepe up at night and say, I don't like the way I played this part on this song, right? And Pepe was like, it was great. It was perfect. He's like, no, I want to re-record it. So Pepe'd call up the studio and Prince, he said, Prince is coming in. He wants to re-record this guitar part, right? He didn't like it. The rest of us loved it. He thought it was great, but he was that serious about music and being, at that age, he wanted to be the best. And
that's what's cool in the book too, is that from Pepe's, perspective, as Prince got more popular, some of the things that Pepe saw from his own eyes and how Prince was, or how Prince maybe was changing, not changing, or this and that. I thought that was really, really interesting in the book.
It is fascinating, and it speaks to, again, Prince was not a perfect, I grew up, it was hard for me idolizing Prince as a kid, to hear anything bad said about him. Right? I remember the first book, I think I was 18 or 19, there was the first book, like serious biography about Prince, that interviewed people that had played with him or grew up with him and were critical of him.
Yeah.
And how he changed when he, as he got bigger. And I remember people saying, money, fame and money, it's hard not to change when that stuff is thrown at you. But it just broke my heart. And I had a friend explain to me, Prince is a human being. You don't know him. He's not your friend. He doesn't owe you, if your relationship with him is based on his music, that should be enough. Right. But yeah,
that's the thing. Everyone's got a story. Everyone's been through some stuff. John Lennon, from John Lennon all the way, you go through, but like, that's the thing. They're human. And I'm with you, I'm with you though. When you hear things, sometimes it gets a little disappointing, but sometimes, the good outweighs the bad, I very, very awesome. And I really, really appreciate you coming on. And, maybe, you could come on in the future and we could talk actual, Prince albums, Pepe albums, it's always just really good to talk to someone about awesome things like this.
Yeah. I would love that.
I really appreciate this. Let me add us to the stream here. What happened here? Oh, there we are. But thank you again for joining us.
Thank you, Tony.
My name is Tony, and that is Tony too. So today was two Tonys talking Pepe and Prince. It was a really, really, really good time. You could find us on the Hookup On Music on Twitter. You could find me on the Twitter at the Sugar Baggy. We are also, like I said at the beginning, now on the Sadistic Penguin Network. So you could please check out everything that we are doing there. Lots of awesome stuff. But again, Tony, thank you so much. And we will talk again soon. Thank you.
I look forward to it.
All right.